Elevator Pitch, written by Sixclawsdragon, read to you by Evie is Evil. This fic is rated for teen and up audiences. No archive warnings apply, and this is a gen fic. The fandom is Batman all media types. The relationship is Tim Drake and Jason Todd. The only tags that I think really stand out here are trapped in an elevator and claustrophobic Jason Todd. And I guess Attack on Titan's Tower. Alright, now on with the summary. Tim gets to know Gotham's newest crime lord. Whumptober 2025, Day 7. Trapped with the enemy/elevator. There are no author's notes and reader's notes. I am currently recording this in the middle of a heat wave, so my window is open and I do have a fan running, so you'll probably hear some background noise this chapter, but I am unfortunately not willing to melt myself for good audio. So you're gonna get this chapter. Anyways, on with the fic.
Keep walking, replacement.
The gun shoves against his back, roughly warning him to move forward. Tim limps onward. His ankle is sprained, but he doesn't think anything's broken. Having his staff torn out of his hands had wrenched his shoulder, but he can still fight when he gets the chance. If the Red Hood's personal vendetta against Robin gives him one, that is. Tim has no idea what he did to make this guy hate him so much. He doesn't even know if they've ever met before this. Maybe it's really something from Dick or Jason's time as Robin, and Hood somehow doesn't realize Tim's a different kid? He's still in the suit, but he'd already taken off his mask when Hood locked Titan's Tower down and came hunting for him. He'll have to deal with the ramifications for his identity later, once he gets out of the more immediate danger. He knows better than to try anything with Hood too close to miss. He's already gotten a bullet hole in his cape from an earlier warning shot, but his mind is racing through ideas, evaluating and discarding ways to get out of this. Robin's always been slippery, and he's proudly upholding that legacy.
Push the button.
Hood's mechanized voice growls from behind him as they come to a stop at the doors of the tower's elevator. You cut the power, it won't...
Push it.
Tim pushes the button. Somehow, Hood has restored power solely to the elevator while marching Tim through the tower, because he hears the hum of the car moving, and then the doors open. Hood pushes him inside, pressing the button for the ground floor. The elevator starts to move, and Tim starts to worry. His chances of survival, and of avoiding torture, go down if Hood gets him out of here and brings him to some secret villain lair somewhere. The elevator judders to a halt, the overhead lights flickering and then going out. Now he's really worried. The muzzle of the gun doesn't leave his back, but Hood goes tense behind him. Not part of the plan, then? Hood can't shoot him in this confined space, not without putting himself at risk too. Tim pivots hard on the ball of his foot as the thought clicks. His other leg, the one with the sprained ankle, swinging up into a kick in the hopes of being the one to react faster. He can't see in the dark without his domino, but he's trained to fight with limited or no visibility. He feels his foot connect with the arm Hood throws up to block, and ducks when he hears the swish of movement, dodging a pistol whipping. He springs forward, grabbing at Hood. He can't hit him through the helmet and body armor, and grappling will let him feel his opponent's body move, even though he'll have to contend with the fact that Hood is bigger and stronger than him. He hits Hood at the waist, his good shoulder driving into him and forcing him to stagger back against the wall. The gun goes clattering to the floor in the struggle. Hood goes for a gut punch that would knock the breath out of him, but Tim twists away and grabs his extended arm, using Hood's momentum to execute a shoulder throw that makes his bad shoulder scream. Hood grabs onto him and drags him down with him, and they're on the ground. Tim goes for an arm lock. Getting Hood into a hold is his best bet, and he can figure out how to cuff him or knock him out from there. Hood doesn't make it easy. They struggle. Hood strikes at Tim's injured shoulder, and nearly pins him down. Tim barely manages to get free. It's like Hood isn't hampered by the darkness at all. The helmet must have night vision, he realizes. He's beginning to think he's not going to win this one, when his elbow strike hits something in Hood's jacket that crunches like breaking plastic, and Hood goes still. Tim takes advantage of the distraction, breaking Hood's grip on him and finally getting the upper hand long enough to get him into an arm lock. Hood doesn't fight the hold. Instead, Tim can hear him unlatching his helmet with his free hand. It sounds like he's fumbling, and his breathing feels odd. It's measured, deliberate.
Get off me,
Hood demands, his voice unfiltered for the first time. He sounds young.
No thanks,
Tim grunts. He doesn't need to go back to wrestling with him. He'll let go when he figures out how to reach the zip ties in his belt, without letting Hood get free before he can use them to restrain him. Hood pulls against his hold a little, testing, but apparently decides not to damage his own shoulder, and stills again. They sit in the dark in silence for a long moment. Hood keeps shifting in place, which can't feel good for his shoulder. Tim's own shoulder is a sharp, burning pain, so he doesn't exactly feel sympathetic about it.
Okay,
Hood finally says, still tense.
I'll give you a deal. I hand you my gun, and you let go. We both stick to our own corners until I can get the hell out of here.
Tim considers it. It would be nice to not have to stay in this position for however long it takes for someone to notice and lift the tower lockdown and find them here. And if he doesn't have to keep Hood in the hold, he can try to get the elevator back up sooner himself. On the other hand, he's suspicious. It seems too easy.
Why should I?
He asks, testing. Hood growls, pulling against the hold again.
Because I'll agree to a truce until we get out, and because if you don't, I'll shoot you here and now.
He hears the rustle of movement, and then something presses against the side of his knee.
Destroying your knee would ground you for a long time, Birdie.
The elevator's too small to...
I've got armor. I'll take my chances with Ricochet.
He sounds like he means it. Given the options available to him, Tim chooses the one that doesn't cause him immediate serious injury.
Put the gun on the floor and push it towards the wall behind me,
he orders, and he can hear the sound of it skittering across the floor. Hesitantly, he releases Hood. He scoots back immediately, wary of being grabbed or attacked. He finds the gun in the darkness and makes sure the safety is on, before he tucks it against the wall in the corner, putting himself between it and Hood. There's still a second gun in here somewhere, still a risk. He reaches into his belt, knowing each pouch by muscle memory, and pulls out a small flashlight. He turns it on, pointing it up at the ceiling to reflect its light through the small space. Hood's backed up against the opposite wall, sitting against it with his legs pulled up to his chest like a kid. Tim can see the other gun now, but it's closer to Hood. He doesn't want to draw attention to it yet. Hood's helmet sits on the floor too. Without it, his face is bare, but it's too dim to really make him out. Something's off here, Tim thinks as he watches Hood, both of them still.
Are you okay?
He tries, and Hood scoffs.
I'm great. This is exactly how I wanted to spend my evening,
he says. Tim studies him in the low light. He looks as young as he sounds, from what he can tell. He also looks very unhappy. Tim pushes himself up into a squat, still watching Hood.
You'll stay over there while I try and restore power? Good fucking luck.
Hood shakes his head.
My EMP generator broke while we were fighting. Took out my helmet's internals. I don't think the elevator will have fared any better.
That must have been what Tim heard cracking earlier, then. Unfortunate. He sits back down. Hood sighs harshly, shifting around. What's got him so on edge? They sit quietly again. Tim tries to estimate the time based on the time he'd seen on his phone earlier, before Hood arrived, and how long it might have been since then. Bruce won't be expecting to hear from him for hours at least. No one will know to come looking, unless someone happens to notice the tower is dark and not receiving any communications. Hood stands suddenly, interrupting that line of thought. He paces a few steps back and forth, and Tim watches, tense. Hood turns on his heel and kicks at the doors with a loud bang. He stands there panting, fists clenched at his sides, as Tim edges slowly closer to the forgotten second gun, carefully reaching for it and bringing it to join the other in his corner, flicking the safety on. Hood doesn't even seem to notice he's moved. He paces again, then drops back to the floor with a ragged exhale.
Robins are chatty, right? Start yapping,
he grumbles. What?
If I have to sit here in silence, I'm going to start tearing the elevator apart with my bare hands. You want to keep your fancy tower pristine? Talk to me.
Oh, is Hood claustrophobic? Tim feels a little bad for him now. He tries to think of a safe, neutral topic to talk about.
Have you ever played Warlocks and Warriors?
It's the first thing that comes to mind. He's been running a campaign for the Titans recently. He can talk about that.
No,
Hood says flatly, unimpressed.
It's a TTRPG I play with my friends sometimes. There's a lot of flexibility with it, since you can make your own content, but the basic idea is usually going on adventures in a fantasy setting,
he explains, and Hood actually seems to be listening.
Like elves and shit?
Yeah, one person serves as the DM, which is like being the narrator and the background characters, and guiding the plot. That's usually me. I can tell you about my current campaign?
Whatever,
Hood shrugs, but talking seems to make him less anxious, which is good for both of them. So Tim keeps going.
Okay, so there's a trader's caravan, camped outside of the last major town they'll pass through before crossing through the mountains. Beyond here, the terrain is tough, and they risk encountering bandits, predators, and bad weather. They hope to hire a few people for security before leaving town. Warriors, maybe a mage. They post an ad in the tavern and with the Mages Guild outpost. After interviewing a dozen or so people, they hire...
He introduces his friends' characters, describing their journey as they escort the caravan through the mountains. It's a lot of talking. They're only a few sessions in, though, so he does catch up to the last stopping point. And then he doesn't have anything else to tell.
That's it?
Hood almost seems disappointed.
Yeah, that's where we left off last time we played.
His mouth feels a little dry, but there's not much he can do about that now.
You read much?
Hood asks, and Tim shakes his head.
Not really. I have a lot going on. Reading's pretty low on my list of priorities.
He has school, patrol, mission with the Titans, and casework keeping him busy. He prefers other hobbies when he has free time.
At least read Aragon. Sounds like you would eat that shit up. Aren't those really long books?
He just said he doesn't have much time to read.
And?
Hood scoffs. Tim huffs, opening his mouth to respond, and the flashlight flickers and dies. Hood swears. Tim reaches for the flashlight, finding it in the dark and fiddling with the bulb, the batteries, the switch, whatever he can by touch. It doesn't come back on. He should have had more battery life than that. They keep track of use and have scheduled battery changes for things like this.
So, you read a lot?
He offers into the darkness, trying to keep up the conversation.
Used to,
Hood says, tense again.
But not now?
It's like you said, I've got other shit to do lately. He sounds a little bitter. Maybe he'd have more time to read if he'd quit the crime lord gig, Tim thinks. But he doesn't dig deeper into that subject. No sense in making the guy angry while they're trapped here together.
Maybe you could just tell me the plot of those books.
That would give Hood a turn to talk for a while.
Not the same. Read it yourself, or get the audiobook.
Or not.
Work with me here,
Tim complains.
I can keep talking, but at least make it a conversation. Fine,
Hood grunts. Okay, Tim can work with that.
Tell me about yourself.
Nice try, replacement.
Why do you call me that?
If you're as smart as they say, you'd figure it out soon enough,
Hood says, which is kind of ominous.
How's school?
School? Tim repeats, surprised. Apparently, it really is every adult that asks when they see anyone under 18. Even the guy responsible for a duffel bag full of heads.
It's fine. Can we talk about something else?
He hears the huff of a laugh.
Fine. What do you do instead of reading then, other than warlocks and warriors?
Play video games.
Tim shrugs, though Hood wouldn't be able to see it.
I like photography. I skateboard sometimes.
Yeah?
Yeah, but I haven't had much time for it lately.
He does miss it, but he'll get back into skating later, when he's less busy.
I used to know a guy who liked to roller skate, like 80s quad skate style. Don't know if he could do any tricks, though.
I've seen people with inline skates at the skate park. I didn't think anyone still used the other kind.
I think they use them in roller derby.
Huh. They lapse into silence for a bit, apparently having exhausted that topic, until Tim speaks up again.
I think it's only fair you share something about yourself, if you're going to ask about my hobbies.
It's not like it matters anymore,
Hood mutters.
When I used to have hobbies, I liked reading, cooking, and cars.
Cars?
Working on them, driving them, if they're fast. When I was a kid, I liked learning how engines work.
It's hard to picture Hood as a kid, but the more they talk, the easier it gets to picture him as the kid he might be when he's off duty. It's hard to reconcile the image with the brutal efficiency of the Red Hood.
Did you grow up in Gotham?
He asks, and Hood snorts.
Where else? They don't make them like us in Metropolis.
Tim smiles a little. They sure don't, he thinks.
Have you seen that guy camped outside the stadium? Apparently, he thinks if he does this ritual every day, the Knights will win the World Series.
He and Bruce had checked on him, and he'd assured them he's fine. Still commuting to work from his campsite and everything. But he doesn't think he can even do any actual magic. But he'd seemed to be enjoying himself. Other Knights fans came to hang out and join the ritual too.
Not even magic can do that.
Hood sounds amused.
One of the girls told me she did a tarot reading on opening day, and it was all doom and gloom for the Knights. I'm inclined to believe her.
The girls?
The working girls in the alley. I keep an eye out for them.
Right. Hood's been a protector to sex workers since taking over the area. Tim's heard of the rules he's imposed, and enforced, lethally. Another thing contradicting his image of Hood. While Tim considers this, Hood sighs, and he hears a light thunk of something hitting the wall.
So when's the Bat coming to get us out of here and lock me up forever?
It won't be forever,
Tim says, rather than admit he doesn't know how long they've been in here.
Kid, you have no idea what's about to blow up in my face.
Hood mutters, then changes the subject.
Tell me more about skateboarding, or whatever.
So Tim talks, recalling his worst wipeouts and explaining a few tricks he can do. Hood opens up a little more, talking about learning to cook from a family member and some of his favorite recipes. He's pretty easy to talk to, alone in the dark like this. Tim can almost forget about the helmet still on the floor somewhere, and the guns in the corner behind him. Eventually, they hear the hum of the tower powering back up. Lights and AC and all the myriad of other things that make quiet running sounds tripping on. The elevator stays dark, something having likely been damaged by the EMP they'd set off earlier. It's not long after that when the emergency hatch is unbolted from the outside and pulled open. Batman's cowl looks down on them, softly backlit by the tower's lights, spilling through the open landing doors of the floor above them. Hood keeps his head down as B points a flashlight into the car, but Tim looks up and nods to indicate he's okay. Nightwing pops up next to him, looking in briefly before swinging his feet through the hatch and dropping to the floor between Tim and Hood.
Hood, nice to see you again,
He says, artificially lightly. Bruce lowers a rope down to Tim, who ties it around himself in a simple harness, and tugs twice on the remainder. He can't climb the rope with his aching shoulder, but Bruce can pull him up easily. Dick's obviously there to cover his escape, but Hood doesn't even stand up.
Wish I could say the same,
He mutters, then sighs heavily.
Let's get this over with.
He finally lifts his head, staring Dick in the face like a challenge. Dick goes tense.
Little Wing?
He asks softly, and Hood smiles bitterly.
Hey, dickhead.
And that is the end of Elevator Pitch. Author's notes. Elevator doesn't even look like a word anymore. I've fallen behind, but I don't have my Whumptober fix written in advance this year, so I'm struggling to keep up with one a day at the moment, but I really want to finish them all by the 31st. Reader's notes from me? I don't have reader's notes. But I like this fic. So, yeah. Thank you guys for listening, and bye!